To my family, he was the perfect man, the one they always hoped I'd find. He was charming, so helpful, everything a good boyfriend is supposed to be. But in private, he was the man who slowly and systematically destroyed my life. To me, he was a monster. This is the story of how I escaped a 4-year-long abusive relationship, only to come home and realize that my family, my safe place, still loved the monster I ran from. And this is how I am learning to live with that. It all started when I was 20. I met David through mutual friends, and the spark was immediate. It was that storybook kind of beginning. He was handsome, funny, and so incredibly attentive. He didn't just charm me, he charmed everyone. My parents were completely won over within a few weeks. He'd come for dinner and insist on helping with the dishes. He remembered my dad's favorite football team and would actually talk stats with him. He even brought my mom flowers, just because. My older brother, Mark, was a tougher nut to crack, but even he fell for it. David helped Mark fix his car one weekend, and just like that, they were best friends. To my parents, he was the son they never had. To Mark, he was the brother he always wanted. They all saw him as the steady, reliable guy who was completely devoted to me. For that first year, it honestly felt like a dream. He was my biggest cheerleader and my best friend. He'd show up at my job with my favorite coffee just to see me for 5 minutes. He planned these elaborate, thoughtful dates. In public, and especially around my family, he was the perfect partner. They told me all the time how lucky I was to have found him. And for a while, I really believed them. I felt like the luckiest person in the world. I had no idea this perfect image was a carefully built trap, one that would eventually collapse and bury me underneath it all. And then things started to change. It wasn't a sudden earthquake, but more like a series of tiny tremors you could almost convince yourself you were imagining. It started with jealousy, but he disguised it as concern. He'd say things like, "I just worry about you when you're out with them," talking about my friends. Or he'd get quiet and moody if I even mentioned a guy I worked with. At first, I thought it was sweet, that he just loved me that much. But soon it started to feel a lot less like care and a lot more like control. The lies started small, too. Little white lies that seemed harmless but were laying the foundation for something so much darker. The most unforgettable one was when he told me his younger sister had died in a car accident years ago. He told me this story with actual tears in his eyes, explaining how the loss had shaped him. I held him. I cried with him. And I felt this deep connection to his pain. It made me feel closer to him, more protective. It wasn't until much, much later that I found out his sister was alive and well, living a few states away. He made up this entire trauma just to manipulate my empathy, to pull me in and make me feel responsible for him. And while this was all happening in our world, in the world my family saw, his star was only rising. They'd rave about how he was helping Mark renovate his basement, or how he'd spent a whole Saturday helping my dad with yard work. He was an expert at creating this image of a selfless, hardworking man. People like him are masters of deception. They present a completely different person to the public than they are in private. It felt like I was living a double life. I'd be on the phone with my mom, and she'd be going on about what a wonderful man David was, just moments after he had thrown a remote across the room because I was 5 minutes late. I started to feel so alone, like I was the only person who could see the cracks in his perfect mask. Those tiny tremors soon gave way to undeniable storms. The jealousy turned into accusations. The moodiness erupted into terrifying fits of rage. It was always behind closed doors, of course. He would never raise his voice in front of anyone else. But in our apartment, the man my family adored would scream at me for things as small as buying the wrong brand of milk. He'd punch walls and break things, and then, hours later, he'd be on his knees, crying and begging me to forgive him, promising it would never happen again. It's a vicious cycle of abuse. idealization, devaluation, and then discard over and over. The psychological toll was immense. I was constantly on edge, walking on eggshells, trying to predict his moods to avoid another explosion. That chronic stress and fear is something so many survivors of this kind of abuse live with. I started having panic attacks. My self worth was just gone, chipped away piece by piece. He'd tell me I was too sensitive or that I was crazy for thinking he was being abusive. It is a tactic called gaslighting, and it is designed to make you question your own sanity, your own perception of reality. I tried to talk to my family, but how could I? How do you tell them that the man they see as a saint is your own personal tormentor? One time, I tried to tell my mom that David and I were going through a rough patch. I hinted that he had a bad temper. Her response was, "Oh, honey, all couples fight. He's probably just stressed from work. You know how much he does for everyone?" It was a complete shutdown. Abusers are so good at managing their image that when a victim finally speaks out, they often aren't believed. My family's reaction, even though they meant well, just pushed me further into isolation. It felt like they had already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. After 4 years, from age 20 to 24, I was just a shell. The breaking point wasn't one big dramatic event, but a slow, horrifying realization. It was finding out the truth about his sister, followed by a particularly terrifying night where he backed me into a corner in our kitchen, his face inches from mine, screaming because I got a text from a friend he didn't like. In that moment, I saw nothing of the man I fell in love with. All I saw was a stranger filled with pure rage. Something inside me just snapped. I knew that if I didn't leave, I might not survive him. Yep, I waited until he left for work the next day. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip up the single bag I packed with my documents and a few clothes. I walked out of that apartment and I didn't look back. I drove straight to my hometown, the one place I thought would be my sanctuary. I really believed the nightmare was finally over. I was so wrong. The nightmare was just entering a new, even more complicated chapter. When I showed up on my parents' doorstep, they were happy to see me, but that joy quickly turned to confusion. When I told them I'd left David for good, I tried to explain everything, the rage, the lies, the control. I could see the disbelief in their eyes. "But he was always so good to you," my mom said. "Are you sure you're not just exaggerating? Maybe you should give him some time to cool off." The real gut punch came a few days later. My brother Mark came over. I asked him if he had talked to David. He kind of looked at his feet and said, "Yeah, he called me. He's really torn up about all this. We're supposed to hang out this weekend." I couldn't breathe. My abuser, the man I just ran from, was still going to be a part of my family's life. He was still friends with my brother. That S when the second trauma began. Escaping him was one thing, but having his ghost linger in my own family was a unique kind of torture. They saw a charming guy who was heartbroken. They didn't see the monster I had just escaped. They couldn't reconcile the two different Davids. And that's what narcissists do. They manipulate everyone's perception, so the survivor has nowhere to turn. I had run from the fire, only to find my family was still gathered around it, trying to stay warm. This past year has been the hardest of my life, but it has also been a time of incredible healing. The first and most important thing I did was find a therapist. Talking to a professional who actually understood narcissistic abuse was life-changing. She validated my experience. She helped me understand that I wasn't crazy. The flashbacks, the constant anxiety, the trouble sleeping, she explained, that these were all normal responses to the trauma I had endured, which was a massive relief. The situation with my family is still complicated. There was no magic moment where the fog lifted, and they suddenly cut him out of their lives. It's been a slow, painful process of me setting boundaries. I had to learn to say things like, "I feel unsafe and unsupported when you bring David up," or "I can't be at family events if he is going to be there." It isn't about forcing them to choose sides. It's about me protecting my own peace, healing from this kind of betrayal from a partner and in a way from your family is not a straight line. It's messy, it's ongoing, but it is possible. It starts with trusting yourself and honoring your own reality, even when other people can't see it. You have to become your own biggest advocate. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like you were screaming and no one could hear you, please know you are not alone. If you feel comfortable, please share a part of your experience in the comments. Reading your stories helps me, and it helps everyone else here feel a little less alone. My final message is this: trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. You are the expert on your own life. And even if the path forward feels complicated and lonely, you absolutely have the strength to walk it. Saving yourself is not selfish, it is essential, and you are worth saving.